Hello again. So, my last tutorial was a little bare bones because we were working within the 15-minute time limit in the career mode. So I figured today we'll come out into free mode and do a little bit of a more thorough breakdown here. So, starting with controls, which the in-game tutorial covered to some degree, but there were definitely some missed stuff. You got your WASD for normal for moving around. You got space for up, C for down. Control is a brake, and the important thing to note with the brake is that it is a little bit to quite a bit more powerful than your main thrusters, so pretty much no matter how fast you get going, that'll bring you to a stop in a hurry. One thing that it did not really mention that I recall is if you press Z or X, you can grab onto things, and if you alternate those buttons, you can move yourself along like so. Now the other thing is, you get a little more sound transfer when you're holding on to stuff. So if you aren't sure that there's fuel in a pipe or something like that, you can put a hand up against it and kind of feel if there's anything moving around in there. So onto the tools, we have our tether, which, as we know, we can grab stuff with. We can press F or middle mouse to punt it. Hey, get back here. Get back here. Now in free mode you have, and campaign will unlock a charge up for that. Now one thing I don't recall the tutorial going over is the fact that if you grab onto something and then hold down right mouse, you can reel yourself into it. Or reel it to you if it's significantly lighter than you are. Let's see if we can get this antenna here, right? If you reel stuff into you too fast, you can smash yourself in the face with it and die, so be careful about that one.
Salvage secured.
On to our cutter. Now in the point mode, this is going to vaporize the object you're pointing at. When we got it in cut, you can see a little hard against a red hull here. There we go. You can see where the cut's going to go, and our right click changes the orientation of that. Now, as an upgrade and in free mode, you can get this powerful enough to cut through the outer hull on a ship. There's not currently any way to toggle that, so you're going to have to be extremely careful with it once you get to that point. I don't know if the tutorial mentions that there is also a kiosk here for the purchasing of things. Air and more tethers and all that, but we're not going to need that in free play. Speaking of tethers, that is right click on the grapple, and that'll pull stuff together. These guys are just out here for you to tie things to and get around if you have to. So moving on from basic controls, we're going to take apart one of the harder mackerel-class ships that I've managed to get to spawn finally. So the first step with pretty much anything, we're going to find the airlock and we're going to get inside this guy. 4 is your flashlight.
Airlock pressure levels dropping.
Okay.
Airlock pressure levels increasing.
So we're pressurized and we're inside. Now right here is the atmosphere regulator. We're going to press that to depressure the ship.
Air pressure levels.
Now you'll notice the airlock door has closed because there was air in there, so it wanted to preserve that. So we're going to cycle the airlock immediately
Airlock pressure
so we
levels
don't make any
dropping.
mistakes with the air pressure that's in there. Now on the front of these guys, you find these pickups. You can listen to those, but we're not going to do that. But you can do it in the hab later if you don't want to do it out here. So you got these 4 things on the front of this particular ship, and we're going to cut those. Now you can, if you get really nice and close up to these guys, cut them with the cutter a little faster without any risk of cutting the stuff behind them. So we're going to step back out real quick here. make a few more quick things. So now that we've cut those, this whole front section of the ship is loose. So we're going to tether that over here so that we can get access to the crawl spaces behind it. And then also while we're out here, you're eventually going to have to cut this panel loose. You don't really have to do it now, but we're out here, right? So let's get that guy. There it goes. Now, when you have something in your thing, you're going to be looking at the little light down above your O2 to see where it goes. And when you throw stuff towards the processor, it's got to get more or less within those red bands. And it's got its own gravity field that'll grab stuff. Now, the main thruster is held in on the inside, so we can't take that guy out just yet. Okay, so thruster and reactor. Sometimes you'll see this black pipe running from the reactor to the thruster, carrying the actual reactor plasma to be used to push the ship along. Now, this here console switch, as you can see, says it's an emergency override. You need to push this to release the thruster from its bracket. But since this pipe is here, there's a very real chance that that will start a fire, because you're not supposed to do it that way. You're supposed to use this console, but we need keys for that. Now we can, once you have the upgrade in career, go through the different modes here. And in objects, you can see what's laying around. And sometimes in a ship you will find, like we have here, the keys. But that is the right way to do it. Sometimes this console won't be here, sometimes you won't have keys. So we're going to cut this guy loose and show you the wrong way to do it. Here goes this. Push you on. Oh, come on. Go on. There it goes. Yeah, the hell with it. We're going to get this guy off because he goes in the barge. And he will tether this guy over here. There we go. Okay. So, next we're going to cut these guys off the reactor. Because as you can see, he's attached to 2 points. To the pipe, and up there to the ceiling. And when we pull him loose, we're going to need to get him out in a hurry. So we're going to just take that plate and send it over there somewhere. Now, until we actually pull it, that plate's still stuck, so it ain't going nowhere. Now we're going to pull the reactor loose, and there goes the plate. We're going to back on out of here. We're going to keep our distance from that, because that can happen. Well, that's fine. Into the bay it goes, and we're all set. Okay, on to the next stage. We're going to come down the side of this ship, and we're going to cut these guys. Now, once you've got the upgrade or in free play, you're going to want to be careful not to cut the hull plating, because it will severely damage the value of it. Now, if you don't have the upgrade, you can line up, see our red cursor here, across pretty much all of these at once, and just pull the trigger and be done with it. So this is cutting all the hull plating off the right-hand side of the ship right now. Once we get all the way back here, we've got the fuel tanks. And we're going to pull the lever on these to vent the pipes above it so that those don't explode. As you can see, since we've already cut it off, we're starting to float a little loose. We're We're going to loosen that fuel tank, but we're going to leave it there for now. Because next, we have to remove the nacelles. So each one of these has 2 latch points. We're going to cut that off. And there you go. Now that that's off, away it goes. Now we can start getting rid of these guys. Now, one thing you'll notice right there is like this pipe has an outsized impact on the physics of other things. Loose objects impart way more physics force than you would expect on each other, as opposed to what you can do to them. Possibly a useful trick here and there, but it's kind of erratic. Wouldn't rely on it. And then, of course, the pipe itself also goes in the processor. I'll just get rid of him. If it'll cooperate. There it goes. Okay, so on this side we've got a power cell. And in career mode, this is very often going to be one of your work orders for this class of ship. So we're gonna... Well, this could be a little dangerous too. Anything electrical, good to keep your distance from it. But we're lucky and it didn't set off the pipes. Right on down here. I'm gonna get up above here. It's a tight fit, but you can fit. Flush this guy. Now, the reason we pull this here is because that releases the pipes from the outer hull, and it also releases the fuel tanks from the outer hull. So when we pull it away in a second here, it won't go flying on us. All right, almost forgot about the nacelles. So we're gonna cut that guy. Yep, see what I mean? We have cut through the outer hull. We didn't really want to do that. Now, if you do too much damage to a plate that goes in the processor, it goes in the furnace now, and it's not worth nearly as much. But, separating it due to that particular little oopsie isn't really worth our time. So we're just going to not care. Now, it's important to note when pulling these guys off, not to try to pull off the one that has the airlock, because he is mounted to the interior hull rather directly. But we'll come back for him. Now, if you have a work order that calls for these airlock switches and stuff, mechanical objects, you can pull them off. Otherwise, not really worth bothering with. Not in my opinion, anyway. Now, to get the airlock panel off, we're going to have to do that the hard way. There we go. I'm going to be outside, not inside. Now, if we've done this right, this guy should just pull right off. And away it goes. Okay. Now, we're going to come down through the main hull.
Object accepted for processing. Credits deposited.
Cut these guys. In an absolute sense, the bone saw is faster, but once you can cut through the outer hull plating, whether you can line it up to where it won't cut through that faster than you can use the needle beam. That's entirely personal preference. It is definitely faster to use the bone saw in the lower power setting though, but until they give you the option to change back to that. Now, it's good to avoid having the beam path anywhere near these soft crates because they can and will set on fire. Okay. Let's double check for brackets here. There we go. There's another one. I'll just get on out here and start taking care of these guys. Now, if it is present, this cargo plate goes in the barge. Alright, left click cancels on the, that guy. Tethers. Yeah, that's what they are. Alright, so now that this is all cleared up, it's really easy to just get all this stuff on out of here.
Salvage secured. Credits deposited.
Crates are pretty decent money.
Salvage deposit accepted.
There we go.
Transferred.
Alright, so now that all this is cleaned out, come on, come here. Last thing we're going to have to do is actually release this guy. So we're going to cut the bolts. Now, wherever you see one of these guys on a thruster, it's important you clear everything around it before you go to release it, because there's a very real chance that this will spit fire everywhere. 50-50. Sometimes nothing happens. Sometimes that happens. We're just gonna let him do his thing there for a bit. There we go. It's going off that way somewhere. But now that that's released, we can pull this thruster on out. And since we've already cut this guy off, this whole segment goes directly into the processor. There's a few little odds and ends on the inner hull here that we can still fuss with if we want. But unless you have an objective for them, not really any significant money. And then the entire inner hull, being made out of aluminum and other soft metals, can go straight into the fire. And that just leaves us with the forward hull. Now, if we want these coolant cells, we pretty much have to cut these off to get them out. Now we'll try on the other side to see if we can get it off without that, because this part's not really necessary otherwise. Mistakes were made. There we go. There we go. The way that goes, well, we can pull our coolant tank off. Now, it is sometimes possible to very carefully wedge these guys out. But sometimes it's not. So if we want it, I'll just have to cut the bolts on this side too. There you go. Now that he's turned this way, of course, we can pull him out. That just leaves us with the cockpit. Now we can pull out this sort of thing from a safe distance. Now when you're yanking stuff out of something like this, you're generally going to get behind it, hold control, and just pull the stuff, and then tap right click. That'll bring it to you.
Salvage deposit accepted. Credits transferred.
Now these computer consoles are probably, if you get them all, the second most valuable thing on this class of ship.
Salvage
You can get a bunch of these, they're always good money.
Salvage secured. Account credit
Oh,
applied.
don't want that. Although, that said, these are easy to overlook. There are storage bins in the corner of the cockpit, and if you have,
Credits transferred.
say, a work order for storage, these guys count. Unless they get jammed. There we go. But if you don't have such a work order, again, not very valuable.
Salvage
Now,
secured.
there is
Credits
technically,
deposited.
we look at our structural thing, a soft metal inner hull on this guy. It can, theoretically, be separated. But that's a lot of work for basically no profit. So he also just goes wholesale into the processor. There we go. We can have a look around and see if we've left anything out here in the bay somewhere.
Valuable object processed.
Like, whatever that is. Where are you? An airlock console. Oh well. Now, as you can see, this has taken us in the upper right about 25 minutes. That's a little long for this kind of thing, but we've also been explaining it, working through the basics. Generally, it's not worth a second day of work on this class of ship. So you just figure out what runs the best and leave the rest. There we go. And we'll come back on in. There you go. 3 million from all that. Now in the campaign mode, they're going to subtract about 500,000 a day for your rental fees, the interest on your loans, all that good stuff. As we can see, the computer terminals, pretty big makers. The nanocarbon panels, the outer hull plating on any ship is probably going to be the single largest item for your income after, well, just before the reactor actually, if you get all of it. Engine nacelles, all that good stuff. Thruster's usually pretty good. But you see down here things like the door bits and glass and the little bits of scrap metal, all that stuff that we destroyed. Nothing really to worry about. And that's pretty much all there is to both the basics and pulling one of those mackerel-class ships apart. Pretty much all the same lessons apply on the bigger types as well. And that's all there is to it.